Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, my name is Susanne Keppler-Schlesinger, Deputy Director of the Diplomatische Akademie Wien, Vienna School of International Studies. Let me first thank Ms. Melusine Bujak for setting up this meeting. Ladies and gentlemen, building bridges between Uzbekistan and Europe is the topic of today's conference, Diplomacy, Your Questions, Our Answers. Well, I'm happy to tell you that we will be able to build a digital bridge today in the afternoon between Austria, between Uzbekistan and Europe through our conference service that was founded in the context of the COVID pandemic. Let me first of all thank Ambassador Fayzullaev for having taken the initiative to nominate 4 eminent experts from his country to participate in this discussion. And my very sincere thanks also go to Ms. Velina Tchakarova, the director of the Austrian Institute for European and Security Policy. Ms. Tchakarova will guide us through today's session. I'm also happy to welcome Mr. Kendall, Officer for Relations with Uzbekistan, Kyrgyzstan and Central Asia of the European External Action Service, who will join us from Brussels. Well, let me start with good news, ladies and gentlemen. The University of World Economy and Diplomacy, part of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of the Republic of Uzbekistan, has joined the International Forum on Diplomatic Training, which embraces more than 60 international institutes from all over the world. And we hope that an open and fruitful exchange on cutting-edge diplomatic training methods will take place in this framework in our joint annual meetings and also beyond that. I would also like to underline the excellent bilateral relations between Austria and Uzbekistan. Both countries have recently decided to open new honorary consulates, and these institutions will further stimulate our bilateral political, cultural, and economic contacts. I can really underline that there is great interest from the part of Austrian companies to do business with companies in Uzbekistan. And it was only a few months ago that 30 Austrian companies organized a successful visit to Uzbekistan. And of course, the doors of my own institution, the Diplomatische Akademie Wien, will always be open for applications from young, talented students from Uzbekistan. They would certainly enrich our cosmopolitan student body and contribute to the friendship between our two countries. Ladies and gentlemen, excellencies, let me finish by recalling that this event will be streamed and is streamed live on our Facebook page. And if our guests wish to raise questions, I invite all of them to place a comment on our Facebook page during the stream. Let me now give the floor to Ambassador Abat Fayzullaev, Ambassador of Uzbekistan to Austria. And I wish all of you a lively and inspiring exchange. Thank you.
Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, distinguished friends, dear colleagues, let me express at the beginning my gratitude for the opportunity to deliver this short welcoming remarks at today's online discussion. This is the first joint event of the Higher School of Diplomacy and under the University of World Economy and Diplomacy, my alma mater, and Vienna Diplomatic Academy. We are glad to see that our interactions with Ambassador Briggs, director of the Academy, are bearing fruits. I also congratulate the Higher School of Diplomacy on becoming a member of the International Forum on Diplomatic Training, which was established in 1972 and run by the Vienna School of International Studies and Georgetown University's School of Foreign Service. Coming back to our topic, I can tell that this is the best time. This is the best time to conduct research and learn about Uzbekistan, its history and cultural heritage, the latest internal developments, changes in regional approaches, and its foreign policy towards great powers. For the last 5 years, we have witnessed a breathtaking series of reform initiatives launched by the president of Uzbekistan, Shavkat Mirziyoyev. His slogan, "It is high time the government serves the people, not vice versa," led to large-scale reforms in virtually every sector. This list of changes is impressive. Financial reform, allowing the convertibility of the local currency, opening to foreign investment and global tourism, toned down censorship of media and media freedom, efforts to end forced labor in the cotton and every other industry. Its positive fruits are already visible, particularly in a new dynamism within Uzbek society, as well as a fresh approach to foreign relations, where a new spirit of regionalism is taking root. In my mind, these are ideal preconditions for moving forward in building bridges between Uzbekistan and Europe, including countries which our embassy covers here from Vienna. Those are Austria, Hungary, and Slovakia. And without further delay, let me yield the screen to our distinguished speakers. But first, of course, I would like to thank you, Ms. Keppler-Schlesinger, for your great efforts in organizing this event, and all participants for their contributions. Thank you so much.
I'm extremely delighted to present shortly our panel guests today. As you have already heard, on the European Union side, we are delighted to welcome Mr. Chris Kendall, who is European Union officer for the relations with Uzbekistan at the Central Asia Division at the European External Action Service. He will start first with his short overview and input on the European Union side as when it comes to building bridges with Uzbekistan. And I would like to stress that he not only coordinates the European Union's relations with the Republic of Uzbekistan, but he also was responsible for the finalizing of the European Union's enhanced partnership and cooperation agreement with Kyrgyzstan. And he, in fact, led the negotiations of a new enhanced partnership and cooperation agreement with Uzbekistan. So he's really someone who has this excellent overview on the matter. And on the side of Uzbekistan, we have 4 distinguished guests today with us. So I was also told that the head of the Center for International Economic and Political Studies under the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Uzbekistan, who is also director of the Higher School of Diplomacy at the University of World Economy and Diplomacy, Mr. Dr. Sherzod Abdullayev will be with us and will be giving a welcoming speech, but correct me if I'm wrong. So on my list, I have Dr. Ulugbek Khasanov, who is head of the Department of International Relations at the University of World Economy and Diplomacy. I also have on the list Dr. Feridun Sattarov, who is the chair of the Department of Political Science at the University of World Economy and Diplomacy. And he's also affiliated researcher at the Center for Ethics of Technology in Netherlands. and Dr. Akram Umarov, who is senior researcher at the Center for International Economic and Political Studies at the University of World Economy and Diplomacy, who is also a senior researcher associate at the NGO Innovation and Scientific Research Cluster in Uzbekistan. And following their short inputs, Mr. Temur Islamov will also join the discussion. He's head of the MBA program of the Higher School of Diplomacy at the University of World Economy and Diplomacy. Following this short introduction on my side, I would like to give immediately the floor to Mr. Chris Kendall.
Thanks, Velina. Thank you very much. Well, it's a privilege to be invited to talk to you today, and a pleasure. And I'm looking forward very much to the conversation that we have. I will try to keep my remarks as short as possible because we have quite a lot to get through, but it's not possible to be super short. Now, as Velina was so kind as to say, I'm the guy in the EU's External Action Service that does the work on Uzbekistan on a day-to-day basis. That is my daily work. I have, of course, with me a number of colleagues, including all our staff in our delegation and the EU Embassy in Tashkent. The EU has had relations with Uzbekistan since independence, and we have a partnership and cooperation agreement in place that was signed already back in June 1996. But things have definitely moved up a gear in the last few years since the President Mirziyoyev took over the reins in 2016. In 2018, we had the launch of our negotiations for the enhanced partnership and cooperation agreement. So this is taking the existing PCA that we had and moving it up a level into a new generation bilateral agreement, which covers just an enormous amount of ground, from political cooperation in security matters, on migration, in sectoral areas, education, environment, transport, through to a very large trade chapter. So we have been negotiating hard since 2018. We've had, I think, 7 formal rounds of negotiations so far. Even through the last year and lockdown, we've been continuing to negotiate by video link. We've been exploring all sorts of new ways of doing this. We hope to be able to wrap up soon. We're planning to have finally another physical round in Tashkent in June, when with luck, we might be able to conclude. As well as this, we had in the EU, we adopted our new strategy for Central Asia in May 2019. So that's already now 2 years ago. So this was a major step forward in our foreign policy for Central Asia. The Central Asia strategy, you're probably familiar with, and I won't go into too much detail, but just to highlight the main elements. It has 2 objectives. The 2 leading objectives of this strategy are that Europe should be a partner to Central Asia for resilience, and a partner to Central Asia for prosperity. So resilience and prosperity. And then cutting across those 2 objectives is the priority of investing in regional cooperation. So using our experience in the EU, drawing on that experience that we have of regional integration and cooperation, and applying it to Central Asia insofar as it's possible. So just very quickly, when we talk about resilience, of course, we mean strengthening the capacity of state structures and societies to withstand shocks, internal and external, and to enhance ability to embrace reforms. And by shocks, of course, we're looking at environmental issues, security issues. We're looking at wider regional issues. We're looking at Afghanistan in particular. But of course, there are other shocks that we don't see coming. Things like, for example, the pandemic that we've all been experiencing. And then by prosperity, we mean primarily support for the economic reforms that have been delivered in the region, but most especially in Uzbekistan. supporting sustainable growth and integration of these economies into the global economy. Now, obviously, our EPCAs, our enhanced partnership and cooperation agreements, are an important part of that, of delivering that objective. We're also strongly supportive of regional connectivity initiatives and looking at cooperating with like-minded partners there as well. So, for example, we're really looking forward to this event in July in Tashkent that will be focused on regional connectivity in Central Asia and South Asia. We're also organising a second economic forum now in the region. That'll be in Bishkek. It was to have taken place last year, and we're hoping that can now take place in the second half of this year. So this year, 2021, I think we're reaching a new level in our relationship with Uzbekistan in particular. Just a month ago, we welcomed Uzbekistan into our general system of preferences plus the GSP Plus scheme. So the GSP Plus is the scheme whereby we eliminate tariffs across a whole range of areas and sectors as a way of boosting trade. But it's done in response to the ratification by our partners of core international conventions. So in the case of Uzbekistan, we're talking about 27 international conventions in the fields of environmental governance, human rights, labor rights, and so on. And by ratifying and implementing these, this puts us on a new footing. This puts the relationship on a new footing, and indeed we now start a new phase in the relationship, and we're going to be focusing now on monitoring the implementation of these conventions. Now, the GSP Plus goes hand in hand with the EPCA, because the EPCA, while being a very broad-based agreement, is not trade preferential. So the EPCA, while doing all sorts of things to remove trade barriers, it does not reduce tariffs. However, the GSP Plus does reduce tariffs. And then the third pillar of this tripod is Uzbekistan's WTO accession, which is proceeding in parallel, and we strongly support that from the EU, and indeed we offer technical assistance in Uzbekistan's application. So that's one angle, the economic angle, which is reaching a new high point this year. We hope that we can conclude the EPCA negotiations this year, though signature and ratification always takes a long time, so that probably won't be this year. Another key thing that's happening this year in our bilateral relationship is that the EU is launching its new programming cycle for development assistance and aid. So this is obviously a very big deal for us. We've completely revamped our entire structure for cooperation spending. We are in the pre-programming phase now. We're busy. We're going to be rolling out our new programming in Uzbekistan, and we're going to be guided by the priorities of the national government, of the president's reform agenda, and also by our Central Asia strategy. These are the key political steers that we will be using. We're going to be paying particular attention to addressing the socio-economic repercussions of the pandemic, and placing a very strong emphasis on green recovery, and this ties in with the Commission's political priorities under Commission President von der Leyen. We're also going to be putting a much bigger emphasis on leveraging private investment in Central Asia. So just a few figures to help to illustrate this. So in 2020, the EU mobilized 134 million euros of support to Central Asia as a direct response to the COVID-19 pandemic. And the European Investment Bank mobilized a very significant package of loans relating to the COVID pandemic for beneficiaries in Central Asia. Now, the EU is obviously one of the world's primary donor of development assistance 410 billion euros around the world between 2013 and 2018. But if you look at foreign direct investment, actually, the figures are even higher. I would even say much higher. So around the world, global FDI from the EU, coming from the EU, amounts to 11.6 trillion euros, which is the highest figure in the world. And just as a point of comparison, we talk a lot about the Belt and Road Initiative from China, which of course is a very significant player here. So during that period, China deployed 464 billion euros for Belt and Road Initiative projects. But it's important to flag that these projects are funded by public debt, not grants. So having referred to China, I think it's really important, nevertheless, to say that the way we approach our relations in the region is we're not looking for exclusivity. We're not looking at it as a competition with any other global partners or players. What we are interested in doing is promoting global standards. We're interested in promoting the multilateral system, the international rule of law. We believe strongly that this is how we all benefit mutually, and so this underlies our approach to foreign policy. We think that the model that we have is a very attractive one. It's been proven effective over decades now of European integration and connectivity. So the European vision offers regulatory predictability. It offers high quality. It offers financial transparency. It ensures that economic development, that connectivity go forward in a sustainable way, in an open and inclusive and a rules-based way, and that they create an environment for sustainable investment in Central Asia and a level playing field for businesses, which of course is extremely important to us. I think I've got a little bit of time left, just very quickly to talk about some of the challenges that we see, where perhaps we could move to seek more opportunity. So we're talking about 2021. 2021, of course, is a big year in Uzbekistan. It's an election year in Uzbekistan. Now, President Mirziyoyev has a motto that is something that we welcome very much, which is, and I quote, "We will not deviate from the path of democratic reforms." This is really a really important public statement and commitment by the leadership. Elections are the ultimate test for democracy. So obviously, we're all going to be watching very closely to see how things develop during this election year in Uzbekistan. A key measure a key metric for the health of democracy is respect for the rule of law. This is something that we experience also here in Europe. So we are not ones to cast stones in this regard. We have challenges wherever we look, but we are looking to Uzbekistan to continue to show a real commitment to upholding the rule of law during the election period, protecting the rights of individuals to engage in political debate, ensuring that anybody accused of breaking law is brought to justice, and ensuring that justice is delivered in a fair way. I also just want to mention Uzbekistan's international image, which we've already talked about. The ambassador was so kind as to mention it. Uzbekistan's international image has really taken off in the last 5 years. It is now a really attractive tourist destination that we all want to visit as soon as we can. I certainly want to go back as soon as I can. But just as important, perhaps even more important, is Uzbekistan's image as an investment destination. The investment climate in Uzbekistan will be the key to delivering a resilient economy, long and lasting economic reforms. The EU is, as I already mentioned, globally the top investor. And international investors need to be confident that they can rely on the rule of law. And that's whether we talk about companies or individuals. So yeah, I just want to close then by flagging that the investment climate depends for its health on the fair application of the rule of law, And that image is something that is very precious and can very easily be damaged. So all the work that's gone into building that image for Uzbekistan, I mean, that it's fragile, is what I'm saying, and needs to be nurtured. But I'm gonna stop there because I think I've probably gone over my time, and I'll look forward to taking part in the discussion afterwards. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your excellent overview about the current state of affairs regarding the European Union relations with Uzbekistan. And of course, you, Mr. Kendall, had more time since you are the only, so to say, the only person who will be in charge of the European Union side. But now I'm delighted to present, to give the floor to our panelists in Uzbekistan, so that they can actually give us the other side, give us an idea about the other side of these relations.
So my name is Ulugbek Khasanov. Dear Excellencies, honorable guests and colleagues, to begin with, let me thank organizers of this wonderful event to giving us chance to discuss important elements of the EU strategy and partnership issues between EU and Central Asia. So in the beginning, I'd like to share my scholarly view on certain elements of the EU Central Asia partnership and cooperation, which started since 1991 when the Central Asian region has gained the independence. So the EU's cooperation with Central Asia dated back to the initial period of independence of the region. The first initiative was large-scale cooperation known as TASIS, Technical Assistance to the Commonwealth of Independent States. The program ran from 1991 to 2006 and involved more than $1 billion in various projects and technical assistance. In 2007, as well known, the EU adopted the first strategy for individual Central Asian countries entitled the EU and Central Asia Strategy for a New Partnership. It focused on cooperation in different areas. The bilateral dialogue between the regions has expanded since then, the results have been reflected in practice. So in particular, the annual meetings between the ministries of the European Union and the Central Asian states and the EU-CA permanent dialogue has launched. So recent political developments in Central Asia have opened up new opportunities for advancing the EU-CA partnership. These changes have led to the EU's political recognition of the region's reform process and its readiness for modernization. The new momentum of regional cooperation was reflected in the first informal summit of CA leaders in Astana in March 2018, which strengthened the relevance of the EU's experience in developing cooperative solutions to common problems, including the Central Asian region. Renewed efforts to develop European-Asian relations have increased the EU's interest in sustainable cooperation and capacity building in the region. The EU's new strategy for Central Asia, adopted in 2019 as well known, is entitled as the EU and Central Asia New Opportunities for a Stronger Partnership. The strategy also focused on strengthening existing areas of bilateral cooperation and establishing new ones. So many factors contributed to the development of the new strategy in our scholarly view, and it's indicated many times in the articles and the research of our colleagues, and it includes changes in its priorities. So since 2016, Uzbekistan announced a good neighborhood policy as a central vector of its foreign policy and opened the door to regional cooperation, which was a major impetus for further strengthening relations with our European partners, the European countries. The plan to develop a new strategy began in 2017. This was followed by a series of consultations with CA governments, with the new strategy adopted in May 2019 and initially presented during the annual meetings of the High Representative and the foreign ministers of the CA5 nations in July in Bishkek. So the change in the EU's regional strategy is due to Brussels' reassessment of its capabilities in Central Asia. Perhaps the EU now realizes that it's no longer wants to manage regional process independently, and that it needs to work with leading regional actors in Central Asia in a number of issues to address its logistical and economic challenges in nowadays. So the most important changes in EU policy, in our perception, is assisting existing regional governments in development and security, and to make into account the Eurasian Economic Union, CSTO, the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, and China's One Belt, One Road initiative as regional policy actors, as they have often been overlooked in previous EU strategic documents. One of the EU's main goals for the new strategy is to strengthen security in Central Asia. So in addition, the Union is interested in expanding trade, including cooperation with energy suppliers in the region. So the strategy emphasizes the significance of both regions, Central Asia and European Union, for each other, needs to intensify economic and security cooperation with Central Asian nations for the further development and integration of the European Union as a single model organization for Central Asia. So creation of transport links, energy and digital networks, strengthening of human interaction, proposing partnerships with CA nations in institutional level, development of sustainable financial system and instruments, strategic and convenient geopolitical location of the CA connecting Europe and Asia. The large share of CA nations in energy imports to the European Union, market potential of the region with a population of more than 70 million, the cooperation with the EU nations in tracking regional security. So the CA nations have undergone large-scale and promising reforms, which are already yielding positive results at the regional level. So cooperation with the European Union will be especially effective in these changing times. So the countries of the region, which have such common interests, have refocused on cooperation. This trend is reflected in the EU new strategy. However, there are still many obstacles for countries to achieve a high level of regional cooperation. The European Union believes that the CA nations need new models of economic development and diversification. These include developing the private sector, improving the investment climate, reducing inequality, and accelerating the transition to a green and harmless economy. So Brussels supports the accession of all CA nations to the WTO. Today, Uzbekistan and Turkmenistan have not joined the organization. That's why the European Commission also wants to mark the goods sold in Central Asia with the country of origin, which applies not only to EU goods, but also to domestic products. So EU-CA dialogue, EU-funded regional programs to promote cooperative solutions at the regional level in areas such as environmental, water, climate change, and sustainable energy, education, sustainable connectivity, capacity building, security and prevention of radicalization, border management, and facilitation of regional trade. At a time that is mutually beneficial and based on existing challenges, dialogue and cooperation program with Central Asian nations can be extended to a neighboring regions too in this context. So that's in generally that's things I wanted to draw your attention in my short scholarly view of some aspects of the EU strategy and partnership with Central Asian nations. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Khasanov, for this excellent overview. And I am immediately giving the floor to Dr. Satarov so that he can actually give his 5 minutes input.
Okay, thank you very much. Greetings to everyone. Actually, I was pleasantly surprised when I was invited to join this roundtable, because I'm not an expert on international relations, but as someone who claims expertise on science and technology studies, I'd like to make a very short input, something very specific. I would like to see, in terms of the future relations between Uzbekistan and Europe, I would like to see more cooperation in terms of science and technology. And one area that I have in mind is what European Union, specifically European Commission, has been doing in terms of creating frameworks for the social and ethical and legal assessment of science and innovation, so-called responsible research and innovation. The increasing development and increasing expansion of AI, artificial intelligence, is something that is of concern here. Whilst Uzbekistan is not among the countries of so-called AI superpowers like China and the United States, still I think in my own view, I think there is a risk and a dangerous possibility that the country, not only Uzbekistan, but other countries in this region, may become flooded with cheaper AI technologies, cheaper technologies from China, for example. And I think it is very important right now in Uzbekistan to build those ethical frameworks for the ethical assessment of technology. At this moment, I think we need strengthened cooperation in those areas, but also in terms of science and technology in general, student exchange. So that was my very short input, in this very niche area. But I think we shouldn't underestimate it. It's not something very futuristic. It's already here. There are plenty of so-called techno-utopians, digital utopians, not only in the Silicon Valley, also, well, in other countries as well. We can find them everywhere. So it's we should be careful with this techno-utopianism, and for that we need some sort of a framework that protects ethics, protects integrity, and protects culture. Thank you very much.
Wonderful. You will receive today the award for being really short in your input, Dr. Satarov. And I did have also a very good question for you afterwards. But first, let me give the floor to Dr. Umarov now.
Thank you very much. I'm also very privileged to be here today with such prominent scholars and policymakers. And I'll try to follow the sample which Dr. Satarov already demonstrated us. I'll try to be very brief and just give some points of my vision of the current EU Central Asia cooperation. First of all, I would like to underline that the fact that EU has devoted considerable attention and resources to its relationship with Central Asia, and in comparison with other external actors in Central Asia, with a very organized approach involving the production of concrete strategies, reviews of these strategies. So you cannot find such approach, for example, in the policies of Russia or China regarding the region. The EU's approach, by contrast, has allowed it to define its relations with Central Asia on the basis of interests in the region itself and not as an appendix to something else. So strategy is fully devoted to Central Asia. It's not linked to other issues, and therefore it's very beneficial for the region. And the new strategy, which was adopted in June 2019, is essentially a repackaged but at the same time more detailed version of the former strategy, with core ideas in connectivity remaining the same with regard to sustainable, comprehensive, and rules-based initiatives. But the strategy is well placed to play on what soft power leverage the EU does have in the region, attraction for its educational and business models, by presenting its vision of connectivity as innovative and equity-based alternative that will benefit the region in many aspects. The second issue which I would like to draw your attention, that the current regional approach of the EU to Central Asia should avoid being mired in a Soviet-era definition of the region. Across the region, in fact, the growing acceptance of larger definition of the region, of Central Asia as extending to the south and east is unmistakable. While maintaining its focus on the 5 post-Soviet states of Central Asia, the EU has far too long treated Central Asia as entirely separate from Afghanistan. Thus, in my view, missing opportunities to develop kind of synergies in its relationship with Central Asia and Afghanistan. And I think EU has considerable potential to function as an engine for boosting Central Asian cooperation, both with Afghanistan on the south and the South Caucasus on the west, at the way to the European continent. Third point, in principle, the Central Asian states are inherently positively predisposed toward non-regional powers' presence in the region. Central Asia is located, between 2 major powers, China and Russia. Its central location and history have made it a popular object of geopolitical strategizing. Also, Chinese investment and Russian security cooperation are often welcomed in Central Asia. The chief objective of their foreign policy is to maximize their own independence and sovereignty, from which follows an urge toward what has been termed as multi-vector or balanced foreign policy. In one form or another, all Central Asian states have sought, with varying degrees of success, to adopt this approach to their foreign relations. Most of all, they seek to welcome other powers in the region in order to exclude, to the extent where it is possible, the full domination of these giants over the region. And Central Asian states view the European Union as one important player in the world, whose presence in the region further helps to diversify their external relations and by this, support their sovereignty. And finally, I would like to briefly mention Afghanistan again. And I think EU can do much for regional cooperation in Central Asia, security, and the promotion of Euro-Asian connectivity. Afghanistan and Central Asia are in dire need of effective and positive outcomes from ongoing discussions and negotiations on the Afghan conflict. If we look briefly on the history of all attempts which were conducted to establish peace in Afghanistan, we can find a lot of different initiatives, negotiating platforms, contact groups, coordination groups, trilateral, bilateral, multilateral formats. So there are a huge number of such initiatives which were developed on Afghan peace process. But ultimately, all of them turned out to be unproductive. And in my view, the main reason for the failure of these past peace initiatives is that they talk too much about the war in Afghanistan, but produced very limited results on the ground that would improve the lives of ordinary Afghans. And the country is in dire need of electricity, hospitals, schools, roads, railways, infrastructure, a new generation of civil servants, educated professionals, in various fields to overcome the current crisis. So I see this area as a potential, as a perspective sphere where the EU and Central Asia can join their efforts in supporting Afghanistan in promoting peace and stability in this country. And in this term, I think it would be very helpful to use probably the most valuable and most effective tool of European Union, education. I think in comparison with many external actors present in the region, education is the most outstanding and the most effective tool of the European Union. And while China can propose a multi-billion projects, still we have very limited cooperation with China in education. While having less economic cooperation with the European Union, we have very advanced educational cooperation. And I think this cooperation should be developed. It shouldn't be concentrated only on higher education. We should think of more on elementary, primary, vocational education, which are also very important in building resilient future of the Central Asian region. Thank you for your attention. I hope I do not expend too much my time.
Not at all, Dr. Umarov, and thank you for your excellent insight. All of the presentations so far contributed to establishing a very broad picture. But last but not least, now I would like to give also the floor to Mr. Islamov.
Dear ladies and gentlemen, it's a great honor to participate in such an event. Considering my background on Afghanistan, Dr. Umarov already mentioned all of the major and important points. So I would like to offer you to move to the discussion part, because always the discussion part is lively and brings more energy and results. So let's move to the discussion.
Wonderful.
Even shorter.
I think I initiated a competition over the award about.
I have a new record here.
which of course was not my intention. And before we jump into the discussion part, I also would like to stress that on the Austrian side, I would step into this very, very minor role on my side. Regarding the relations between Uzbekistan and Austria. In fact, 2017 marked the 25th anniversary of the establishment of the diplomatic relations between the two countries. And both countries maintain very lively cultural relations, also expanding their business relations, as we've heard at the beginning. And what is also interesting and important, I think, is the cooperation on the side of environmental issues. And I am using this opportunity. And of course, I missed also one important major issue, and that is that Austria, as a country that has a rich cultural history, many Austrians are also interested in the famous cities of Samarkand and Bukhara in Uzbekistan, and actually are interested in visiting this beautiful country once the COVID crisis is over. So also the historic Silk Road is of a great interest when it comes to bilateral relations. And this is, I think, something that will be expanded for sure in the future. But I'm using now the opportunity to, why I mentioned this is because and this will be my question to our European Union panelists. What, in your view, is actually the opportunities and the potential, given that the European Union has now launched ambitious programs regarding the decarbonization, regarding the greening of economies, and regarding so one of them is, of course, the famous Green Deal. But of course, we also know that the European Union will be further promoting relations also with third countries when it comes to to these environmental issues. And we've heard also from our panelists who are right now sitting in Uzbekistan that these are in fact also issues that are relevant and important for Uzbekistan, and also given that we have also these soft skills here in Europe when it comes to education, when it comes to civil engagement. I think this is something that the European Union can offer in the long terms. So this is my question to Mr. Kendall, and I will also very shortly outline also my questions to our other guests so that I can give you immediately the floor. And one of them is, of course, I would like to ask, what is the one major obstacle that you see, but also one really major success that you would like to point out, given the previous steps in the relations between the European Union and Uzbekistan, but particularly following the COVID-19 crisis, which will be the one really special focus that you think, if this happens, if this takes place, it will be a major success, and if it doesn't take place, it's going to be basically a major obstacle for the bilateral relations. And specific question, as I said to Dr. Satarov, is regarding technology, because the European Union took a very specific position when it comes to the role of big tech. And it also initiated already, launched initiatives regarding regulations towards artificial intelligence and big technological corporations. Do you think that this can be one way how the European Union can also speed up relations with Uzbekistan? Can the European Union be helpful if we take into consideration that other external actors such as China and Russia, for instance, are not interested in regulating these spaces at all? On the opposite, are actually in fact profiting from, specific closeness of these systems. And yes, I think this is for now. And yes, Mr. Kendall, you can start first, and then I will give the floor to the guests in Uzbekistan.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, I mean, that was very interesting interventions that I thought really, I'm a civil servant, and I speak to other civil servants, and I hear a lot from politicians, and I think it's actually, I love this interaction that we have with the academic community. I think it gives a different perspective, and I find it very, very valuable. You've asked me a lot of questions. I've made a bunch of notes, so let me try and put some order into them. So let me start with Velina, with your question. The first question, sort of opportunities and potential, looking specifically in the area of the environment. So, gosh, I mean, there are so many strands here. So we have put this very big emphasis on a sustainable recovery from the pandemic. Big emphasis on green economy, and this ties in very much with our political priorities in Brussels, with the priorities of our current politicians, the President of the European Commission, whose big push is for a green recovery. And it cuts across so many areas. We talk about the Aral Sea and the environmental disaster there. We talk about access to water, climate change, and how that's going to impact the access to water. Uzbekistan in particular, we talk about Central Asia as a whole, but Uzbekistan in particular is so exposed to environmental risk. So back when I was talking about resilience as being a key theme of the East strategy, environmental resilience is probably, I would say it's probably right up there at the top of all the issues that we need to. The COVID it can be seen in that context. It is a strand of environmental sustainability. I mean, are we managing our healthcare systems? Are we managing our food chains in a sustainable way? The water issue is going to feed into so many broader political issues, disputes over territory, migration, all of these hot themes in Europe that are going to, there are also hot themes, of course, in Central Asia, and are going to be increasingly the core of the cooperation that we discuss. So I didn't get time to talk about regional cooperation so much. I mean, this, as I said, is a cross-cutting theme of our strategy, as distinguished panelists know very well. We've got a high-level political and security dialogue coming up hopefully to be hosted physically in Tashkent in June, possibly. It was postponed. We were supposed to have it a couple of weeks ago. We had one last year virtually, and we had one the year before that. And having sat in on these dialogues, the discussion on environmental matters is, I think, runs through the entire thing. I mean, it's core to security. It's core to cooperation, and it's where you see the real advances being made also by the regional governments in talking to each other. And it doesn't always, there are always going to be hiccups along the way. So we've just seen this last week this very unfortunate situation developing between Kyrgyzstan and Tajikistan, and how quick leaders were to jump in and to try and calm things. But I mean, these things are, I think, inevitable and a legacy of the past. But I mean, I think we really see enormous progress over the last, really literally just 2 or 3 years in terms of addressing these challenges. And so a very big focus of the EU in our relationship with the 5 countries is water security, resilience, climate change, addressing the desertification of the Aral Sea, restoring that local economy, looking for ways in which we can work together to build more resilient economies, which means higher value products, production chains, less monoculture, less reliance on, for example, over irrigated sort of cotton, and looking for more sustainable ways of growing the economy, also in ways that then create jobs and reduce other sort of demographic pressures. All of these link up, and that's, I think, the key to good policy, to good strategy, is to identify these connections and these links, and to try and approach these things in a strategic and coordinated way. So we talk about the environment, but I mean, we also talk a lot about connectivity. Connectivity is political. What's the phrase? It's very dear to the hearts of our politicians at the moment. It's a phrase that we talk about a lot, but I mean, practically, it's a really good way of packaging a whole bunch of issues. So many of the issues that we've been talking about. I mean, the EU's connectivity strategy, which was adopted in this bundle of things that all came along at the same sort of time. So the Central Asia strategy was followed just a few months later, but it was being written at the same time as, and with an eye on, the connectivity strategy, and also the most recent China strategy that we put together. All of these things are, of course, very closely interrelated, and the people who write these things were all talking to each other. We all work in offices near each other. So the connectivity, when we talk about connectivity in the EU context, we talk about 4 strands. So there's the obvious, which is sort of transport infrastructure. So I mean, that's obviously really important in terms of integrating Uzbekistan and the other Central Asian countries into the global economy. But more important, I mean, more specifically, we're talking about getting goods from Europe to East Asia and Central Asia and vice versa. So that's one way in which we build a sustainable economy. And then we need to talk about more sustainable transport routes. So we were talking about the South Caucasus, we were talking about routes across the Caspian and into Europe that way. I mean, these are tremendously important, and a lot of attention and investment is going to be focused on those. I mean, we're going to be leveraging more sort of private funds. We're taking a slightly different approach to the Chinese, but nevertheless, a very big priority for us. But it's not just transport; it's also digital. Digital has been a massive focus now, of course, since over this last year. We've seen how digital can make distance disappear almost. I mean, I was introduced by you kindly as speaking from Brussels, but I'm not speaking from Brussels. I'm actually speaking from my family home, which is in the UK. So outside the EU, I'm sad to say, but here I am. And, you know, I'm working on a daily basis with my colleagues in the delegation in Tashkent, as well as my colleagues in my team in Brussels. And actually, the only difference is the time difference. It's in terms of the contact that we have. I might as well be working just as closely with the colleagues in the delegation as I am with the people in my office next door. So this is a huge area of focus, and that can be a key answer to environmental concerns and sustainability concerns. Then we need to talk about energy. You can't talk about sustainability without talking about energy, and energy connectivity is key, because we're talking about the EU's energy security and access to energy resources in Central Asia. But we're also going to be, we need to be looking at alternative energy resources. We're not going to be talking about oil and gas forever. We need to be talking about other energy resources, whereas there are some countries in your region that are big exporters of hydro energy. There is so much potential for Uzbekistan, for example, in the area of solar energy. So I mean, there's enormous potential here. And then the final strand of connectivity, which then speaks to many of the other issues that we've been discussing, is the human angle. So human connectivity. And this is where we can start talking about education. We can start talking about not just higher education cooperation, but also cooperation, in all areas of education. So this is tourism is another one, and we're hoping that as soon as we are ready, we can take part in this big tourism conference that the Uzbek government is planning for Khiva. I think they're going to have it in Khiva. Maybe later this year. I hope I get to go. So I mean, just then to close. Well, two things. Firstly, on education, on cooperation in that area. I thought what the colleague said about cooperating in ethical frameworks for technology. I mean, that's super important. That's a big theme in Brussels. I know for a fact that there's a lot of work being done precisely in that area, where while the technological lead has rather been captured by the Californians and the Chinese, we need to see a role for the EU in that, but we need to also to make sure that role is we need to keep an eye on that from the point of view of from ethics, from the regulatory perspective, for all the reasons that you said. So that's something that we're following very closely, and we do feel that the EU can be a leader in that area, much as we have been in other aspects of normative power and regulatory and global regulation. So that's something that we would most welcome cooperation with Central Asia on, and I think that's going to be a big theme of our cooperation going forward. Now, I was just looking, I just pulled up the text, which I can't share yet because it's not in the public domain yet, but the text that we're negotiating, the EPCA text that we're negotiating with Uzbekistan, of course, has a chapter on research and innovation, and that mirrors to a large degree the chapters that we have in the EPCAs that we've already got with Kazakhstan and we've finalized with the Kyrgyz Republic. So that's a very big focus of ours going forward, and I know that beyond what the EU does, our member states also do at a bilateral level, and below that also just individual institutions. I know that there's been a lot of investment by individual European higher education institutions in Tashkent, for example. So these are very welcome, and I think really important ways of building that cooperation from the grassroots up. And you also mentioned, Velina, the role of NGOs and civil society, which we place a great emphasis on, and in the context of the implementation of our strategy, we also push for we organise a civil society forum and that plays just such an important part in progressing these issues. I just wanted to mention one program that you may be familiar with, which is the program that we conduct with Uzbekistan and Kazakhstan on educating Afghan women, which brings together many of the things that we've been discussing. So we provide some funding with for that along with Uzbekistan and Kazakhstan, and then Uzbekistan and Kazakhstan host a number of they have a number of places that they keep for Afghan women in their higher education institutions, and that I think is just a really important project in terms of delivering that that educational advantage, if you like. So just to finish my long intervention here, you asked me to see if I could identify one major obstacle that could push things in one way or the other. I mean, perhaps I'll just refer back to my opening remarks where I talked about the rule of law. I feel that that's the one that I want to highlight. I just think that it's really important that the very positive language that we hear from Central Asian governments, I think in particular from Uzbekistan, we just need to see that translate into reality, into real social change. I know that that's a challenge. I know that's a challenge. You know, we are very conscious that this is not easy and that it can take time. But at the same time, we also see sometimes the distance between the language and the reality. And I think that there have been a few incidents recently, for example, where those differences have, I think, received wider publicity and been picked up in some of the Western press and so on. So I think it's just a good opportunity to flag that, to take stock and to say, well, you know, if we're going to deliver on all of these plans for a sustainable green recovery, for multilateral action and cooperation to address environmental threats and so on, that's not going to work unless, for example, investors can operate in a climate where they are confident that they're going to be able to enjoy the benefits of the rule of law and so on. I'm not saying that that's not happening. I'm saying that it's important that that continues to happen, and that's something that we need to always keep an eye on. Maybe I should stop talking.
Thank you, Mr. Kendall. You've really extensively outlined the potentials and the challenges and the possible risks. And now, first and foremost, I will extend the panel and at least until 1620, so that all our guests in Uzbekistan have the chance also to respond or to give to present their perspective. I wrapped up the questions already. Maybe one final very minor question that came in, and that is that whether you see also the European Union with its member states as a potential constructive third actor in the region, as a way of balancing between more assertive external actors such as Russia and China. This was already mentioned in your presentations. So please stick to 2 minutes per member so that we really have the possibility to listen to everybody in this final round. And I'm giving you you can decide now who would like to start first. We have one technology question, and the rest is basically related to all of you, depending on which part of the question you would like to answer. Short answers, please.
Okay, to follow your way, I would ask my colleague Faridun Sattarov to start first with technological questions. Then we continue with other bunch of issues Ambassador Kendall raised. Okay, thank you.
I'm very happy that the questions concerning technology have come to the foreground, and we start with technology rather than put it in the footnotes. First of all, I would like to clarify a couple of important things about technology. The first one is technology does not follow a deterministic trajectory. or deterministic path. That is, it is subject to social constructivism, so to social intervention. It doesn't mean that we cannot do anything about it, that the robots are taking over the world. We can be quite active in these areas, and this is the first thing we should know about technology. And the second one is that those who develop technology, those who produce technology, I'm talking about companies, firms, corporations, they are naturally inclined to protect the interests of their shareholders, not consumers so much. Whether they are in America, whether they are in China, it's the same. And now, as for China, I think it's going to have an advantage because it is because of its proximity to Central Asia. Not only China, also in Russia. If you've been following the news, they have recently started facial recognition. AI technology in Moscow and other subways, and that's been quite a recent development. So what I'm trying to say, because of the proximity, so not only in Uzbekistan but in the whole region, I'm talking about the whole region of Central Asia, the markets can be flooded. Again, I mentioned that previously, the markets can be flooded with cheaper technology, which may not have, let's say, of a dubious moral nature. We have to prevent Central Asia becoming a market for such technology, and we also have to prevent Central Asia becoming a so-called ethics dump, where you can come and also not only sell but also develop technology or conduct, let's say, clinical trials because of lax regulation. So to do this, to achieve these objectives, we need to create stronger ethical and legal frameworks. And I think this is one of the areas in which European Union, European Commission has been very active, I should say very proactive. I have been myself part of the many projects funded by the European Commission, creating frameworks for ethics assessment. So I think this is an important that would be a very important social and cultural intervention on the part of Europe, I think. Thank you very much.
My dear colleague Temur Islamov didn't use his chance to deliver his views. That's why it's your chance to share with us about the connectivity issues in Central Asia.
Just making notes about the technology, and I just wanted to make a small remark on technology in particular. So technology, it's good, and the fruits that it gives, it's like technology is the key to development. But we should not forget about the creative destruction. Creative destruction is good, but the immediate effects that it may result may negatively affect the people. So another important thing will be the education. So with the technology, we should also stress our attention to the education, so that whatever new things we bring, we should make sure that our people are ready for that. So this is a small remark I wanted to do. So
you mean digital forms of education?
In any forms of education, as our colleagues just mentioned, that we already have a strong bridge with Europe in terms of the higher education. Like both of our colleagues, they are the graduates of the European schools. This is already showing some trend that we see at the Europe as a source of quality education. So we should work on that. And as I said, when we think of the technology, all of the new stuff, machines, robots, they are run by people, less people, but still people. So these are the people who run this stuff. So we should make sure that our younger generation is ready to be able to use this technology for our future benefit. So this is,
and that is to say that we have to keep in mind that we, in every new technologies, or the technologies what Feridun Sattarov has mentioned as a new term in the Central Asian development, as a new strong term in Central Asian development. This is to say that we should keep in mind the human factor at the same time in such developments.
yes. As I said, like the creative destruction, immediately, like it may create some gap between the jobs, etc. But on the other hand, it creates new opportunities and new level of more advanced jobs. So here, education steps in. This was the idea.
Okay, okay. Akramjan, do you have any remarks to share?
So,
Little time left.
yeah, connectivity is a buzzword for today. So I think
Yes, and particularly the power shift, the global power competition shift, because this is also something that was particularly mentioned by you. Maybe you would like to take just the opportunity to outline your shortly your anticipation about the upcoming 2 to 3 years of competition.
yeah, thank you very much. It's in my view, saying honestly, it's quite that's a complicated time for Central Asia. Yeah, as a place where we can see the presence of variety of external actors with not always compromised interests. I think in these terms, Central Asia can face some difficulties. So as we see this escalation of relations between major powers, if this tendency will grow up, so this can definitely affect on Central Asia. These powers can put the issue of choosing one camp, yeah, as it happened during the Cold War period, and it's the worst scenario for Central Asia. In these terms, I think it's important to continue our partnership, especially with the European Union. And as I mentioned briefly, European Union has truly positive image in Central Asia. Yeah, we do not have any negative perceptions, negative history of relationship. So in these terms, there is no toxic elements of our cooperation. And I think that's why it's important for European Union to further continue support of transformation and modernization reforms in Uzbekistan. And I think it's important not only in the framework of Central Asia, and if this experience will be successful and will end up in building new type of developed country, we can say that this model can be further used by other developing countries in Asia and worldwide. Yeah, and we have some good experiences on post-Soviet space of transformation, but if you compare them with the case of Uzbekistan, they were quite small in scale, and still they were quite close to Europe. So if we will establish some good experience and good practice in this part of the world, I think it would be very important, not only for Central Asia itself, but for the greater space of Eurasia.
Thank you very much. Yes.
In my turn, dear colleagues, I'd like to share all things my colleagues shared are very important and very significant elements of connectivity in Central Asia. And Ambassador Kendall shared, and in his very in-depth analysis, almost all areas and spheres of Central Asian development in the context of connectivity. But I wanted to mention one element, one point, that within last 4 or 5 years since 2016, the region started changing seriously, because our leader, our government has announced the new approach for Central Asian development. And in our foreign policy, Central Asia is considered as a main central focus of our foreign affairs. That is to say that the traditional relations with our immediate partners and immediate neighbors has very important significance for developing certain projects with our neighbors. And during pandemic, as every crisis, pandemic is a real crisis, global pandemic is really crisis. But in this crisis process, our government worked on certain anti-crisis project, and one important element of that project and the program was deepening, in spite of this critical situation, deepening our close cooperation in this pandemic situation with immediate neighbors, sharing with them humanitarian aid and supporting them in such difficult times when we announced it in Central Asia, the lockdown in March 15. So since last year, March 15. So since March 15 last year, we conducted certain projects closely cooperating and aiding our immediate partners in Central Asia, and industrial context, in the social context, in different contexts. So that's one important aspect of the connectivity again. Reminding these, as you mentioned, the ambassador, the Aral crisis, we have to keep in mind that within the last 15, 16 years, we didn't raise this issue on the level of the regional leaders summit, which was initiated by our leader in 2018. And on base of his initiative, Central Asian leaders gathered in Turkmenabat, in Turkmenistan, to discuss and work on certain projects and the program to save Aral Sea, to work on certain resilience programs to revive and reconsider national approach and national programs to save Aral Sea as our climatic issue, our environmental threat. So that is one thing we worked since the last 3 years, and that is about, again, connectivity and capacity building in Central Asian context. That's an important factor. And keeping in mind our certain social efforts to support our Afghan partners and neighbors, as most probably you know that Uzbekistan built within last 4 or 5 years certain secondary schools and education centers in the territory of Termes region for young Afghans to rehabilitate and adapt them for new educational projects and programs. That's one thing we effort in Central Asia, and we as the Central Asians understand that Central Asia has its own common legacy and the common culture. You mentioned a cultural aspect of the connectivity, and that's a very strong element of our relations with our partners. So that is something that I wanted to put from my side.
And with these positive remarks, with a lot of excellent insights and inputs that gave us a good platform for, I hope, the next similar panel discussion, and why not one that we will conduct in Uzbekistan to continue with this highly interesting academic exchange. I would like to close this panel discussion. I would like to extend also my gratitude to our panelists, to Ambassador Fayzullaev for staying with us the whole time, and of course to the organizer of this event, Vienna School of International Studies, and Deputy Director Dr. Susanne Keppler-Schlesinger. Thank you very much, and stay safe and sound, of course, and I'm eager to participate in the next exchange, which I'm quite sure is going to happen very soon. And I wish much success in this new academic program that is going to be a big success. Thank you very much and goodbye.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thanks very much. Bye-bye.